man puts flyers on people's doors every day, as long as no one tears down the flyers for days on end. He'd pick the lock fair and square and sneak in for a few days, because most people who see a flyer on their door will tear it down. If they don't, that means the family went on a trip. Jack would sneak into someone else's house. First, brush his teeth with someone else's toothbrush, and put on someone else's clothes. Experience what it's like to be the host. Finally, he'd take out his camera, take a picture with the host, and ride away. But he didn't just go to someone's house and freeload. Before each host went home, Jack would wash their clothes, and then he'd take them out to dry. By this means, Jack has moved in hundreds of families without a word. But the strange thing is, he had never been discovered. That day, as usual, he went to the house of a rich man who hadn't torn up any flyers for days. While he was checking the rich man's room as usual, he didn't notice a bruised woman in the corner, watching a stranger enter her own home. Ellie didn't call the police. Instead, she hid and watched his every move. She watched as the man ate and then helped with the laundry. Suddenly she felt that this stranger did not seem like a bad person. At night, she ran boldly to Jack. Jack was so scared that he hurriedly put on his clothes and was ready to leave. He didn't expect Ellie to suddenly shout. At first, Jack didn't care, but in the middle of the road, he suddenly realized that the woman might need help, so he hurried back to the tycoon's house. He kept stepping on the gas, constantly making the sound of the gas pedal roaring. He didn't expect the woman to hear the noise. She got into his car. Follow him out of this place. From then on, Jack took Ellie with him every time he posted a flyer on the door. The two of them would sneak into other people's homes. They ate and wore other people's food, but they didn't eat and drink for free. They do laundry for others before they leave, and clean everything up because they're like parasites. The feeling of living in someone else's house made them happy. That day they went to an empty house, as usual, but when they opened the door, Jack froze. He couldn't bear to look and closed the door behind him. Ellie was curious. She opened the door. The next scene stunned Ellie. Man takes his girlfriend and posts flyers on people's doors every day. As long as no one tears down the flyers for days on end, that means there's no one in the house. The two of them would sneak into other people's homes. They ate and wore other people's food, but they didn't eat and drink for free. They do laundry for others before they leave, and clean everything up because they're like parasites. The feeling of living in someone else's house made them happy. That day they went to an empty house, as usual, but when they opened the door, Jack froze. He couldn't bear to look and closed the door behind him. Ellie was curious. She opened the door. She didn't expect to see an elderly man living alone die suddenly in his home. Jack wanted to leave, but kindly Ellie had walked into, looking at the house with only a poor little puppy left behind. Jack rushed to turn on the old man's phonograph. As a result, he was surprised to find that the old man's son had gone out on a trip. The kind-hearted Ellie wiped the old man's cheek. She found a cloth and wrapped the old man in it. Then she helped his son to take care of the old man's funeral. After that, she cleaned the room and scrubbed the floor. At the end of the day, Ellie made a great meal. Unexpectedly, while they were eating, the doorbell suddenly rang. When the two of them were scared and didn't know what to do, the old man's son, who had been away, suddenly returned home with his daughter-in-law. Looking at these two strangers whom they had never met before, the daughter-in-law hurriedly called out her father's name. After realizing that his father was not at home, the couple rushed out of the house in fear. Without saying a word, they called the police. Soon the two were taken to the police station for investigation. After looking at the photos from Jack's camera, the police were incredulous because the photos showed that they had been to hundreds of other people's homes. After investigation, the police found the old man in the yard of the old man's house after being properly disposed of. The police originally thought the old man was killed by them. Luckily, the autopsy showed that the old man died of cancer. Although Jack was not sentenced to jail for murder, but he was convicted of human trafficking because after investigation, they found out that Ellie was a recently reported missing person, and so it was that Jack ended up in jail. But Jack didn't give up on it. He practiced invisibility in the prison because as long as he was invisible, people could never see him. In order to practice the art of invisibility so that no one can see him, this prisoner spreads his hands in the cell every day and then gently move his body to train repeatedly because he knew that people's perspective is only 180 degrees. As long as he didn't appear within others' 180-degree range, he could never be detected. The art of invisibility will naturally be accomplished. As expected, after a period of training, one day when the prison guard was checking the room, he suddenly realized that the prisoner was missing. Startled, he quickly opened the door to check, but there was no sign of Jack. Unbeknownst to him, Jack was right behind him, avoiding his gaze. Though Jack's steps were light, but the sun's reflection betrayed him. The guard turned around and beat him with a stick. They thought Jack wouldn't dare to do such a boring thing after that, but then a strange smile appeared on Jack's face. From then on, he became more and more crazy. In order to perfect the art of invisibility, he even drew an eye on the palm of his hand. Every day, he experienced the feeling of being behind the eye. The unexpected thing is that over time, he actually managed to make himself invisible. The guards thought Jack was playing another prank, but when he walked into the cell, he couldn't find Jack no matter what, and he was beaten up by Jack. After 10 years of training, he had perfected the art of invisibility. Following this, the day of his release came. The first thing he did after his release, Jack came to the rich man's home, though the tycoon sensed something was wrong, but he couldn't find Jack no matter what. He just felt a cold chill behind him. Ellie sensed something was wrong in her house. She rushed to the mirror to check, but the next second, the familiar Jack appeared in her line of sight, but Jack's silhouette could only be seen by Ellie. The rich man couldn't see him no matter what. In the following days, every time they had a meal, Jack would use his invisibility to appear behind the wealthy person. He lived in the rich man's house without a word. Some say Jack died in prison. Others think it's all in Ellie's head. What do you think happened to him?